Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 349 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Aranda. The show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. You can check it out at StrengthCoachPodcast.com as well. On the StrengthCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. I spoke to him about Zone 2 training. Okay, we've been talking about this a lot. He's posting a lot on Twitter. There's a lot of talk on the forum. But I wanted to see, look, where is he at with this right now? Why he feels it might not be useful for athletes, even though he doesn't even really use it with athletes, and he hasn't used it with athletes. And his thoughts on using it as a phase in the off season. Don't forget, we did a special interview called 40 Mistakes, 40 Years. You can access that interview by signing up to my newsletter at StrengthCoachPodcast.com or ContinueFit.com. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. You can get free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach. Today I have on Patrick McKeown. Patrick is an international breathing expert and the author of The Oxygen Advantage, as well as The Breathing Cure and Atomic Focus. I talked to him about his story and how he had to overcome asthma and his own breathing problems and what led him to become a breathing expert, why nasal breathing is so important, how nitrous oxide is beneficial for blood flow. We talked about breathing light, slow, and deep and what that means. We talked about air hunger and how you can use it to improve breathing. We also talked about how coaches can use breathing exercises like breath holds, unclogging, and box breathing in sessions, and the importance of taping the mouth when you sleep. So much more. I love this. I got Patrick's book 5 years ago, and between that, Breath, the book by James Nestor, I just really changed a lot of really the way I slept as well. So great stuff coming up from Patrick in a little bit. For the KISS Marketing Business Secrets for Gym Owners segment with Vince Gabriele, Vince is going to go over for a 4-step annual framework to review your year. So what you need to do before the ball drops this year. Don't forget, KISS Marketing is a digital marketing agency that helps fitness business owners make the big bucks from their marketing without feeling stupid, stressed, or wasting valuable time figuring it out on their own. Check out kissmarketing.net to book a free coaching call with Will Matheson, Vince Gabriele's secret marketing weapon. For the Getting Started with VBT or Velocity-based training segment, brought to you by Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. This week, Nika's going to speak about why VBT is valuable. Now, this is wrapping it up. They have this segment and then next segment, and then they won't be on the show anymore. So they've had a really good run, taught us a lot about velocity-based training, so I really appreciate them. And we do have that new segment from Nomly, Maximizing the Member Experience with Sumi Seth. Sumi is the founder of Nomly, and Nomly is the member experience platform for modern training gyms, and it puts all of your communication with your members in one place. Go to nomly.com. You can schedule a demo and get a feel for what it's all about. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Today, Sumi's going to start a 3-part series breaking down the different components of staging a memorable experience. And he's going to bring up some folks in the fitness industry and some other brands. And he's going to talk today about a well-designed theme and 5 things to think about when designing it. Guys, the Perform Better holiday sale, this is the time. 40% off racks, benches, bands, sandbags, cleaning supplies, you name it. It's all on sale. The holiday sale is here. Check it out. Also, the one-day seminars are coming back starting in January. They're going to be in Jersey. They're also going to be in Austin, LA, Chicago, and Boston in the coming months. Check it all out at PerformBetter.com. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the shrinkcoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Don't forget, you can try the new shrinkcoach.com app for 7 days for free. Totally new format, user-friendly, same great forum. As always, it's the place where top coaches in the industry come to connect and learn. Check it out at shrinkcoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing excellent. Anthony, how are you today?
I am excellent. A little gloomy here in Indiana, and that was for our new.
It's a little gloomy. It's rainy.
Is it?
Rainy and kind of raw, but I think it's in the low 50s right now in Boston. So
yeah, that's the only thing. We were freezing for a while, and now it's kind of gloomy. And I don't care about the temperature. I just want the sun. So this depresses me.
No sun.
All right. I told you earlier I don't have a lot prepared today because I'm just thinking, why bother? Because I think we're going to have to go a little bit on zone 2 again. I know we've been talking about it a lot, but there's a lot of stuff on Twitter, and some of your threads. You know what's really interesting about Twitter? You had written the one that I think this will get me in trouble. But I think zone 2 training is not an athlete thing. And when I looked at that, the funny thing is you have people now that are, I guess, don't even want to deal with you personally anymore. Like even Steve Magnus, he retweeted it, but it's like didn't respond to you, but made his own response. Rugby strength coach here went flat. Same thing. Some people, you probably went 50-50. It's really interesting how Twitter, like some people just don't even want to get into that argument or with you. Like some of your threads have been just crazy. And it's very similar to the vaccination. You have divided people in zone 2. So I do want to just talk about where you are. And I think part of the confusing part is this. You're doing zone 2 work as a 63-year-old man, and who's trying to work on heart health. But at the same time, you train athletes, and your consensus seems to be like, look, I'm still looking at doing what I've always done because we find that that's better. But can you talk about where you're at right now with your athletes and zone 2?
Well, with our athletes, we're not doing it, and I'm assuming that it happens somehow, some way on its own. And that's why what I'm finding, it was very, very interesting. And I said this to somebody this morning. I'm finding the experts aren't very expert. The people who are sort of act like they know it all, when you ask them hard questions, you don't get really good answers, which I think is very, very interesting. One guy, I said, I've been doing a lot of zone 2 work, but I'm not, from a performance standpoint, I don't seem to be getting better. I tried my 2-mile time the other day, and I struggled. I mean, it was like, break in 5 minutes was a real effort. And usually I can do that every day. I can be, in the 450s without any problem at all. So I'm thinking, wow, I'm adding all this extra time on my aerobic system. And then somebody said, well, your performance isn't going to get any better. Only your recovery is going to get better. And I'm kind of like, is that really what we're looking for? I mean, and that's where I think what happens, and there was another guy, and it was very interesting on Twitter. His Twitter picture, he has a bike helmet on, which tells me something right off the bat. But he said, well, yeah, a basketball player could do his whole basketball practice and then hop on the bike for a 90-minute ride. And I was like, I want to be with some of these people. What planet are you from? You're not working with the same people that I'm working with. I don't know any athlete who, if I said, yeah, when you're done with the workout today, I'd like you to just get on your road bike and ride around for an hour and a half. People would look, hey, like you're the man from Mars. And so it's just an interesting phenomenon because it clearly is. I mean, there's no question, and I forget who it was. It might have been Brandon Marcello or somebody that was kind of jumping in and out of the threads, basically said, this is really good for people from a longevity perspective. And I believe that part. I think it really is good for people from a longevity perspective on a bunch of different fronts. But even when you get into, like, everybody was like, well, you're getting basically a concentric heart with all the high intensity stuff that you do. But then I kind of nail somebody down and say, okay, explain that to me. and somebody else, I think the name is Ian Markow, which Vinny Toludo found some of his articles. He was saying that if you do interval training the way we tend to do a lot of our interval training, which is basically coming back down to 120 between intervals, you do get some of that eccentric heart. You do get the filling, because what I did learn, and this is what's really good, I get it in terms of when you're constantly running at a high heart rate, it's like your heart is beating. It's like boom, 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 boom. It's not that sort of slow fill up, squeeze out, fill up, squeeze out that people say that you need. But the reality is that's not probably what we do the vast majority of the time. Then we get into the whole thing. People are saying do circuits, but don't lift weights. Doing circuits, you can do zone 2 work, but if you lift weights, that's not heart healthy. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, wait a second. What about and I've asked this question before with people, what if you're training in kind of a peripheral heart action way, the manner that we do in terms of pairing an upper body, a lower body, and sometimes a core and a tricep? Is that not going to have a differing effect maybe than powerlifting? People say, oh, the blood pressure is going to go up too high. The heart rate's going to go up too high. And I'm kind of like, well, if we're still getting that 170, 120 kind of flow during the course of the weight workout, and maybe even going a little bit lower than 120, is that not having effect? And what I really keep coming back to is I don't think these people have any idea what they're talking about in relation to a team sport athlete. And that's what somebody else said, oh, then you say, so you're saying that cyclists and rowers aren't athletes. And I'm like, no. And then I tweeted out, all right, Twitter character limit. I meant to say field, court, rink, team sport, athlete, but I just said athlete. It kind of like everybody doesn't know who I deal with. And the Steve Magnus part, I think he wants no part of me, to be honest. He's another one of those guys who we've never met. He's a really bright guy. I don't think he could stand me for probably any number of reasons in terms of things that I've posted. But I guess, and aren't you glad you didn't have a lot of questions, because you knew I was just going to talk for 20 minutes?
Yeah, I know.
Not letting you get a word in edgewise, but people get so mad at me for asking questions and for having an opinion. People are kind of like, you can't have an opinion because people listen to you. And it's like, well, that's why I get to have an opinion, because it's people that listen to me. But people really get mad. They think, oh, you're swaying people, you're leading people astray. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm asking good, hard questions, and I'm trying to get good answers.
What's funny is that you say that. I know you don't. I don't follow rugby strength coach here too much, because some of his stuff is like, he just posted pictures. He retweeted your tweet, and then he posted pictures. So we're all supposed to figure out what he's saying. So I'm not as smart as him, so I can't figure that out. But somebody responded, Mike has strong opinions on zone 2 training, when a week ago he was asking what mitochondria do, right? Like you can't even ask a question. Like, you're being vulnerable and saying, hey, I want to know more about this, right? So if you state your opinion, you're wrong. If you ask a question, you're wrong.
And if I say I don't know something about something, then I'm also wrong. And that's what's interesting. And they've become like, I didn't know what subtweet was. And my friend Missy on Twitter told me that subtweeting is like what Steve Magnus and Kier do with me is subtweeting. They basically take my tweet and then they repost it and they don't tag me. And then they shit on me. Well, and I don't know that they're doing it. It's very much, it's so like great, like high schoolish in terms of, oh, we're going to talk behind your back. We're not going to let anybody, not going to let you know we're talking about you. And I don't tend to do that. I tend to throw it out there, and I keep tagging the people in the tweets that are responding to them. And I really am genuinely trying to get to the bottom of something. Like, okay, explain this whole like zone 2 fascination to me. And then the crazy part is all the experts give you a different description. Some people are 60, some people are 60 to 70. Some people say you can do circuits. Some people say, it has to be alactic. Some people, and then people are like, oh, it's right below. I just got one today. It's right below ventilatory threshold 1. And I'm like, ventilatory threshold 1, right? So is that talk test? So it's crazy. You get the big word people out. But the biggest thing for me, I'm not stopping. I'm having a lot of fun. I don't really care. Like I always said, the beauty of my situation is I don't have to care. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I know there's people that don't like me, and I know there's people, like I said, I get criticized for being too set in my ways, and I get criticized for changing my mind too often. So you're like, hey, I'm in a no-win situation because I'm way too set in my ways. I'm an absolutist, but I change my mind too often. And it's like,
yeah.
Coach, then I get Brandon shooting broadsides at me every time on these. And I
got to say, Brandon, I don't know if he's going to be listening to this. He might be, but his tweets, his responses didn't really help me either because there is so much of the it depends. I think with this stuff, it's, well, what does the client need? And right, there's a lot of that. That's a lot of the responses. By the way, the subtweet thing, they're not doing it as much behind your back as you think, because all I did was go on your tweet and it said there's 5 shares. And then when you go on it, it says which one is quote tweets. That's what, you don't just do the retweet. You had 14 quote tweets. So when you click on that, it shows you who tweeted with your quote in it. So they're not completely hidden. So just so you know. And Coach, here's my question to you though, this is my butt to that tweet. So let me tell everybody, this will get me in trouble, but I still think zone 2 training is not an athlete thing. The best way I have seen people get better at doing any high intensity task is very specific, high intensity training. Here's my but how do you know? Because you haven't really spent any time with your athletes for a period of time doing zone 2 training to test this.
Not zone 2 specifically, but I have tried all kinds of different formats where people have said, and this is where, I mean, this opinion goes back long time ago in terms of one thing I realized is that the only time we got better at something was when we did the thing that we wanted to get better at. So for instance, the old days, guys had to run 1.5 miles at training camp. And we'd take longer runs once a week. And we'd do that stuff. And then, guys would come and they'd try to they'd run the 1.5 miles and they wouldn't run any better. And the only time we'd get better at the 1.5 miles, like we actually got better at the 1.5 miles when we did 440 repeats. When we got to the guys when I got guys that could do 6 440s in like 70 seconds, that guy had a better chance of running a 9-minute 1.5 miles than a guy who went out and did, 3 or 4 miles 3 times a week. Like we really have run these kind of experiments over years and years and years with a lot of these kind of higher intensity tests, whether it was 300-yard shuttle run or these kind of things. And the one thing we realized is specificity of training really matters. So and that's why years ago, you look at my first Bruins manual, one of the things that I said is that only test things that you want trained. Because if you put tests in that are not specific to what you want trained, your athletes will train very, very hard for the test. So for instance, we want a sit-up test. So we try to figure out a sit-up test. And it was basically like, how many somebody hold your feet, the hands behind your head, elbows to your knees, whatever it was. And my guys 3 weeks before training camp would be pounding that test out 3 times a week. And I'd kind of look and think, that isn't really what I wanted them to do. I just was trying to find a way to evaluate whether or not they had some abdominal strength. Now, again, that was an ancient, outdated test. That's not the point. But the point was that the guys were going to very specifically train for whatever we said the test was. So what I always found is I wanted tests that were going to support the training that we wanted done. So if I wanted you to run 110-yard sprints, then I would test 16 110s. If I didn't want you to run 110-yard sprints, I wouldn't test 16 110s. But if I didn't want you, I used to say to somebody, don't ask guys to not run distance and then test 1.5 miles. Because you're going to have guys, we'd have guys, pros, who'd be doing the 1.5 miles 2 or 3 times a week, just going out and running the test. Because they figured out, hey, the way to get better at this test is to repeatedly do the test. And I believe that to be true. And that's why I said with the zone 2 stuff, I mean, I'm finding I do feel better. My HRV is going up. Like there are things that are happening that are good, but what I'm not seeing it reflected in is if we're looking at, MAS, max aerobic speed, that 2-mile test. Okay. If theoretically, if my aerobic system is improving, then my max aerobic speed should probably get higher. That's what I would think. But then people are like, no, that's not what happens. And then I think we get back to that idea of, oh, we're going to have a really slow guy who recovers great. And again, I've been saying these things for 30 plus years. I used to tell my NHL guys, you'll always never win the race to the puck. And they'd be like, what do you mean? And I'm like, exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
You'll always be second. And you'll be second over and over again. You're going to get so good at being second that you'll never be first because you're going to recover great. But the guy, Connor McDavid's going to beat you to every puck because he's faster than you. And I think that's the part that I look at and say, wait a second. If someone's saying to me, where are we going to spend our time and our energy? It's not zone 2. It's the exact opposite end of the spectrum in terms of it's really, really high speed stuff. And then I do think some of that other stuff backfills itself in. The one thing I am going to do, and I said I wouldn't let you get a word in edgewise, so I'm going to make sure I don't. But I did start playing with the warm-up a little bit because what we had tended to do in the warm-up, and I think I said this to you, was like dynamic flexibility first, followed by what people would say were speed drills. So we might do like leg cradles and walking, SLDLs and, lunge walk or world's greatest stretch or whatever it is. And then we'd start skipping and high knee running. And what I realized now, and I think I said this before in the other podcast, and I'm going to get this, I got to video it. But now I started looking at it and saying, wait a second, I'm going to do, knee hug and leg cradle, and then I'm going to high knee run. And then I'm going to go back and slow down, do something more stretching oriented, like my walking SLDL. And then I'm going to do straight leg walk, and then I'm going to do straight leg skip, and then I'm going to do straight leg run. And then I'm going to slow back down again and go to another stretch. I might do my walking heel to butt stuff. And then I'm going to do running heel to butt. Then I'm going to do like kind of my back lunge to hamstring stretch. And then I'm going to do back pedal and backward run. So what I'm trying to do is level off the heart rate of that warm-up period. Now, that may only be 10 minutes, 8 minutes, because that's not enough for zone 2. But I'm looking and saying, how do people know what the cumulative zone 2, if I got 32 minutes of zone 2 prior to every workout or every week, or if I get 40 minutes of zone 2 every week during my warm-up and during my jumps and during those things, is that not the same circuits that they were talking about? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and so what I guess I'm saying is that people keep kind of changing the rules and moving the goalposts and saying, oh, you can do this, but you can't do this. And they don't really have any kind of concrete, even evidence for what they're saying, at least not that they can show me.
Yeah. Coach, what about, so you mentioned better HRV for yourself even. So obviously that's probably everybody. And everybody keeps talking. There was a guy, Tony Carney, did a subtweet. The ability to recover is hugely important in athletics, and the biggest determinant of that is a robustly developed aerobic system. What about this idea of almost phases? Like, okay, we're going to do zone 2 in off season or in maybe a little bit in preseason. Have you thought about that perspective? Like, not saying we're going to do it all the time, but maybe.
Okay, I said that to Vinny the other day. With our pro guys, I said maybe in phase 1 we have them do 20 minutes of zone 2 every day after they get done. So their conditioning, instead of going in and starting with more sprint interval format stuff, maybe we'll just say, hey, 20 minutes slow heart rate stuff, and see how they respond to that. Do they, mentally, how do they respond? Physically, how do they respond? And I guess this is what people don't realize. I'm not averse to making changes. I just want to make the right changes. I'm not going to make changes because somebody tells me, it's like dating a popular girl. Like, oh, this girl's really popular, you should ask her out. I'm like, well, if I don't like her, I'm not asking her out. and like zone 2 now is the darling of the internet, and everybody suddenly, oh, zone 2, are you doing zone 2 work? How much zone 2 work are you doing? And then I'm looking at it saying, do we even know what this means? And do we know can anybody, again, I love, a robust aerobic system, blah, blah, blah. And I'm kind of like, how do you know that? I mean, I look at it and think, one thing I know is that we have really, really successful athletes, and we do no direct aerobic work at all. We have not done direct aerobic work for a really, really long time. And we're talking about lots of, Olympic medalists and lots of people being really successful at their sport. And we haven't done any of this. And I look at it and think, I feel like if this was as wrong as everybody says it is, we would have picked up on that. We would have had people who would have said, no, this isn't working. I'm going, I'm failing conditioning tests, or I don't feel good when I play, or whatever it is. And we're not seeing that. And we're very much, I can remember years ago, and I won't, to speak his name on the podcast, the great Vern Gambetta, but used to always talk about specific work capacity. And I always remember thinking, specific work capacity, that makes sense to me. So if I'm a hockey player and I look at the game and say, okay, 7 45-second shifts a period, done over 3 periods with 20-minute rest in between. It's pretty darn interval in nature. I look at that and think, okay, if I just do interval type training with those guys, they're probably going to develop the specific work capacity to play the game. And then someone else is going to say, oh no, but if they have a more robust aerobic system, they're going to do better. And I'm like, we're not seeing that. We were seeing some guys with really robust aerobic systems who were not succeeding because they were doing, at that time, what was very popular in the NHL with the long 45-minute, get on the bike 45 minutes every day kind of thing. And we were finding that those people were having more problems and did not feel as prepared as our guys who were doing a lot of sprint interval type training. So I would like for people, what I'm saying is I wish people had evidence to support their opinions. I think we have lots of people who have lots of opinions and don't seem to have a great body of evidence. Whereas I look at it and think, we have a pretty good body of evidence. We're able to look at this and say, no, we've done this repeatedly with people, and it seems to be working.
Mike, one quick question on this is going to be just you assuming or your experiences. I was thinking of last night I was on the bike. I watched the second period on the bike, and it was like 27 minutes of zone 2. And I thought, what if I did 20 minutes of zone 2 and then banged out like some kind of, 4 minutes worth of intervals, right? 10 20s or, whatever. That's not interference back.
That might be best of both worlds. And I think that's what, if you listen to Inigo San Milan on Peter Attia's podcast, I'm pretty sure that's what he said to do.
Oh, wow.
Or what he said one of the possibilities was. And that's what I mean in terms of, if you suddenly sprint, do you negate, do your mitochondria all say, oh, you screwed it up, Anthony?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I was chilling, getting stronger because you told me I was under 130 and I was under ventilatory threshold. And then you went and took me up above, and now I spit back out all the stuff that I was making. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. And the thing is, I don't know if other people know.
Well, there's that whole interference effect, right? Yeah. About how the endurance training can stunt muscle growth. There's been some research on that, right? Depending on within that session, I think Charlie's talked about within that session. So that's really where I was trying to, that's what my question was. What if I, that zone 2 technically is my warm up, quote unquote, my warm up, go into, good interval training. If I had the time, again, we're not talking about, maybe back in the day, you used to say, if somebody puts you on a treadmill for 5 or 10 minutes as a warm up, fire that trainer. You might be, starting to.
No, I wouldn't look at it as warm up. I'd say put them on after.
Okay.
Not on a treadmill. Put them on a bike. But
Mike, one quick question. Look, somebody who runs like the best marathoners in the world, right? They're like a little bit over, 4-minute mile. It's super fast, right? Have you ever seen kind of somebody who can kind of do both? Like, so some of your soccer players back in the day, can they have great 40s and had great, really great endurance as well? Have you seen somebody that would has that been common among a soccer player or hockey players or
super uncommon?
Okay.
But I have seen people like that. Yes.
Okay.
But I would say super uncommon because again, it's, the old, you can't ride two horses with one ass.
Yeah.
So you think, and I always go like Eric Heiden, super uncommon. The guy won the 500 and I think the 5,000 in the Olympics in speed skating. But you have to be, I think, because I feel like everybody, and this is the difference, and it kind of goes back to the idea, Charlie loves to talk about building monsters. But I think that's the idea. If you look at it, and this is, I guess, my primary thesis. If you look at the people that dominate the game, any game, you generally don't look and think aerobic monster. What you look at is, wow, freak athlete, right? Crazy speed, crazy vertical jump. That's the guy that dominates the game. So I'm looking and thinking, I'm always trying to build that. Even though I know I'm not going to be able to build that, I'm always building towards that end. Because if I look at the other end and say, oh, really aerobically fit guy, and this actually, I should send you the article. I just finished Feed the Cats for Hockey. And one of the things that I said, when this was 1989, we did a mile and a half or a mile run. I forget what it was. But my 5 predicted Olympians were the last 5 guys in the mile run. And the mile run was won by 2 walk-on guys. And I looked at that, and this was when hockey was, all in on the aerobic VO2 max whole thing. And I looked and said, wait a second, I got 2 guys here who are 5 guys that are our fastest sprinters and our highest jumpers, and also our 5 best players. I have 2 guys over on the other side that are going to struggle to crack our lineup. They're our most aerobically fit guys. I looked at that and said, okay, how do I want to train everybody else? The NHL people were telling me, train them all like these 2 walk-on guys who just run your mile run. And I looked and thought, it's kind of the Robert Frost thing, right? I took the road less traveled. I looked and said, no, I'm going to train everybody like Mike Sullivan and Sean McEachran and Joe Sacco and those guys. These guys are super explosive because I think I can get these guys in shape, but I'm going to really struggle to make the other guys like them. Like I'm going to really struggle to make the other guys be able to, to run a whatever 10 and to be able to vertical jump 30 inches and do what these guys are doing. So I think at the very end of this, that's really the question that you get into when you are talking about field, court, rink, team, sport athletes.
We don't have a character limit here, so good stuff. Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Vince Gabriele. Welcome to Business Secrets for Gym Owners. Today, I'm talking to you about what you need to do before the ball drops. And it's December, so you're probably thinking about the year you had and the year you want to have in 2023. So I figured I might as well enter that conversation that you're having with yourself and give you some insight on what are a couple things that you should be doing to prepare for that. So upcoming, and I do this every year, I meet with the members of my SPF Mastermind, and we spend an entire day going through the framework I'm about to share with you. The first thing you want to do is you want to share, relive what happened in 2022, right? So look back on your year and look at your things like your revenue, things like your profit, things like the things that happened with your hires and all of that, and try and extract the lessons. What was good? What was bad? And what things do you want to carry forward from that? What things do you want to never think about again? And there's a lot to be learned from the past year that you had. So just take some time to reflect on that, right? In your journal, write in your notebook. I have a bunch of guided questions that I ask my guys on how to recap the year that they have had. So that's number one. Number two is, what is the vision and strategy? Now, those are two very big categories, right? But the vision is, where do you want to be 12 months from now? So where do you want to be on December 31st, 2023, right? And then the strategy is how you're going to get there. It's the plan. I call it Oz and the Yellow Brick Road, right? Oz is what your business looks like in 12 months. And the Yellow Brick Road is the strategy that it takes to get there. So the strategy could be the type of hires you need to make. The strategy could be what changes you need to make in your business. But the strategy is essentially your plan for success. The third piece that you want to start thinking about is the marketing piece, right? And this is what we do, is we'll unpack and recap what's called a 12-month marketing calendar. So there'll be several things that you'll need to be doing to be able to extract the marketing plan for your business. And there's, things that you need to be doing quarterly. There's things that we need to be doing daily. There's things you need to be doing weekly. But at the end of the day, you guys need to have a clear-cut plan for what you're doing for your marketing. And the final piece that you want to think about is your personal goals, right? And these are the goals that you're setting for yourself. These are the ones related to your own personal health. These are the ones related to your families and everything of the sort. So there's really those four categories that you want to start thinking about, right? So let me recap. There is your recap, right? What happened, right? What happened? And what did you learn from it? There is your vision and strategy. What do you want and how are you going to get it? There is your marketing, which is also part of your strategy, but I really put a huge emphasis on marketing. So really you could kind of take the marketing plan and calendar as part of your strategy, right? And then the final piece is your personal goals. Like, what are your goals for your own health? What are your goals for your personal finances? What are your goals for your family and everything like that? And I think that's like a really good framework to follow to plan out a really, really great year in 2023. Now, after all this is said, it probably helps to have someone guide you through all this. If you are interested in joining us, we do this for a full day on Zoom. And I have a whole packet that I send you and I guide you through all the questions, and I do this with Mastermind, and I do take a couple non-Mastermind members to go through it. If you're interested in joining us and going through this with me, just go ahead and send an email to vince@gabrielfitness.com and put annual planning session in the subject line. And then I'll give you some details on how to register for that program. But it's something we do every year. The Mastermind guys look forward to it every year. But hopefully that framework is helpful for you to get your year planned out. So go ahead and send me an email, vince@gabrielfitness.com, and I will get you all the details on how to join us live for the annual planning workshop. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you soon. Peace.
Hey everyone, welcome to Getting Started with Velocity-Based Training, or VBT, brought to you by Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. I am Nico Ouellette, and I'm the head of marketing and education for Perch. And in this series on the Strength Coach podcast, we cover all things related to velocity-based training. So we've talked a ton about the theory behind VBT, the zones, the metrics, the programming, and even readiness and fatigue monitoring. But as this segment winds down, we wanted to bring everything together and discuss why velocity-based training is valuable. Put very simply, VBT enables accurate and objective prescription of strength training volume and intensity. Traditional strength training measures a 1-rep max and then assigns percentages of that 1RM across training cycles to achieve specific adaptations. The reality, though, is that a 1RM is a moving target. constantly adjusting given fatigue, nutrition, game schedules, and the like. By introducing VBT, coaches can use a percentage of a rep max as a guideline, assign a velocity, and adjust load appropriately to ensure the load and velocity match the desired adaptations. Using different speeds and loads across a continuum will help athletes and coaches train smarter. In a review from Dr. Jonathan Weekly, Dr. Brian Mann, and several other researchers called Velocity-Based Training from Theory to Application, the researchers defined 6 feedback variables and their impact on training performance. The variables were frequency. So the feedback after each rep has been shown to have greater effects than after each set. Number 2 was quantitative versus qualitative. So quantitative feedback of velocity enhances performance greater than observing video recording of previous exercises. Number 3 was conscientious. So athletes with low levels of conscientiousness have the greatest improvements in output while verbal encouragement is provided. Number 4 was motivation and competitiveness. So when visual feedback of outputs are provided, improvements are observed in both males and females. Number 5 was intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsically motivated athletes may prefer visual feedback, while extrinsically motivated athletes may prefer to hear feedback. And number 6 was encouragement. Verbally encouraging statements can enhance barbell velocity and power output. Ultimately, velocity-based training can be a powerful tool to help coaches provide appropriate load, monitor performance over time, and track longitudinal trends. We would highly recommend reading Velocity-Based Training from Theory to Application if you want to learn more in greater detail about using VBT and what that application actually looks like. And lastly, VBT can be used as an extremely powerful feedback tool for athletes of all backgrounds. So if it does absolutely nothing else, it does that incredibly well. That is all for today. Thanks for listening. And if you have any more questions about VBT or want more information and special deals, head to perch.fit/strengthcoach. That is perch.fit/strengthcoach. Thanks.
Welcome to Namli's Maximizing the Member Experience segment. My name is Sumit Seth, and I'm the co-founder of Namli. Today, I'm going to start a 3-part series where I break down the different components that go into staging that memorable experience. Think of these components as the key ingredients one needs to make your own perfect cake. To help you in understanding these components, I'm going to go out loud some names of businesses that I've chosen, and I want you to think about the first images and words that come to your mind. Here we go. Hard Rock Cafe, Cirque du Soleil, Mark Fisher Fitness, Stronger Personal Training, which is Frank Nash's brand. Now, if you're like me, these are some words, images, that should have popped up into your head. Hard Rock Cafe, iconic guitar-adorned entrances. Really a pop music museum that serves food. Cirque du Soleil, acrobatic gymnasts, jugglers, and sophisticated clowns. A giant circus with extravagant sets and, surprisingly, no animals. Mark Fisher Fitness, rainbows, unicorn, and glitters. Stronger Personal Training, neon lights, fast-paced music, and energy. The similarity among these 4, my dear friends, is that all of them have a well-designed theme, which is our very first component. The purpose of the theme is to drive all the other components that I'll speak to in future parts towards one unified storyline that wholly captivates the customer. Every interaction that the customer has with such a business helps to create a lasting memory in their mind. It basically helps you to stand out and become distinctive. Now, if you're like me, you might be saying, that is all fine and dandy, but how the hell do I design this theme for myself? Where do I start? Well, fear not. I wasn't going to leave you hanging. Here are 5 things to consider to get your creative juices flowing and taking those steps to design your own very theme. 1, seek a universal theme. 2, hone in on a theme that sticks to your avatars. And of course, you. 3, consistency. You have to weave this theme into everything that you do. Think before, during, and after the interaction. 4, aim at simplicity. 5, seek feedback. and better the process. And like with most things, when you start putting these pieces in place, you would be astonished with the results you start getting. That's it for today. My name is Sumit Seth, co-founder of Namli. For more info, please check out namli.com. You can schedule a demo to get a feel for what it's about and how we can help in ushering in that member experience. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on a free 30-day trial.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by Athletic Greens, 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. It fills the gaps in my nutrition. Athletic Greens is going to give you a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. I highly recommend getting this subscription because they're going to give you 20% off, and you can cancel or you can kind of skip or extend your subscription whenever you want. So go to athleticgreens.com/shrinkcoach. All right, today I have on Patrick McKeown. Patrick is an international breathing expert and an author based in Galway, Ireland. Since 2002, he's worked with thousands of clients, including elite military special forces, SWAT, Olympic coaches, and athletes. I first learned about him once I was doing Wim Hof stuff, led me to Brian McKenzie and his group, and they were completely, you got to read this book, The Oxygen Advantage. Patrick is the author of The Oxygen Advantage, as well as Atomic Focus, which I just started, and The Breathing Cure. So, Patrick, thanks so much for doing this. I'm excited.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much, Anthony.
All right. I was telling you earlier, I told my wife, I said, I'm interviewing the guy that you absolutely love, even though you don't know him, the guy that got me to put tape on my mouth at night, completely cleared up snoring and some of the noises I was making, and kind of got me into the habit of really, I felt like the sleeping part anyway was really set the foundation for me to really be a better nose breather. And this thing is huge that I got here. So it helps. It's helped me a lot. And so I'm excited to be doing this. So I want to talk. I told you earlier, I always love when somebody played a sport and they're coaching, or even a strength and conditioning coach for that sport, because they really understand the journey that their client or athlete's been on. Mm-hmm. And that's you with this idea about breathing. Can you talk to us just about how you became or stumbled upon having to learn how to breathe better?
Yeah, I suppose you don't. Well, at least 20 years ago or 24 years ago, you wouldn't have embarked down this road as a career option. So you had to have fallen into it by accident. I was a kid growing up. I always had a stuffy nose and I had asthma. And when you have both combined, you're more likely to have sleep problems, which I had as well. So going to school, in primary school, which is junior school, I was doing fine, doing okay. In high school, I went from very much towards the top of the class and went to the bottom of the class. And at 14 years of age, I left school altogether, never to go back. I had a total sense of frustration because I couldn't concentrate in school. I didn't have the energy levels to hold my attention on what the teacher was saying. And I was this mouth-breathing kid, upper chest breathing, faster breathing, wheezing kid. So I wasn't going to be an athlete, put it that way. But I left school to work. And then I ended up going back 1 year later. And I got into university, but I had to work really, really hard. And then I was in the corporate world. So I got my degree, was in the corporate world. And then I was reading this newspaper article about a Ukrainian doctor who had worked with astronauts during the space race. And he talked about breathing in and out through the nose. And he said that your breathing should be light. And I was this kid reading this and thinking, I never breathe through my nose, or hardly ever. And my breathing isn't light. Like, my breathing was noticeable even during rest. I would have disproportionate breathlessness during physical exercise. So I picked up one or two of his exercises. The internet was in its infancy. This is back in 1998. And I practiced the nose unblocking exercise, and it actually worked. I knew I was onto something then because, If you do something and it works straight off, and for anybody with a stuffy nose, you don't just have a stuffy nose, you're also likely to have sleep issue. Your concentration is impacted, but you're also going to be more at risk of injury during sports. If your sleep is impacted, you're not going to have the mental capacity and the mental agility to be fully there with your attention fully there. So I'll just throw that in now. So when people say, well, I don't have a stuffy nose, or I'm a good breather, this breather, that breather, I suppose, for me, I was really at the bottom of the barrel. So I could only go one way, and that was up. And it made a tremendous difference to me. And I was never going to work in this field. I was taping my mouth from day 2 or day 3. I wore nasal dilators on my nose to keep my nose open, taped my mouth closed. And second or third morning, I think it was the second morning, I woke up and it was the best night's sleep I had in years. So, there was a few things. And there was another thing, Anthony. I remember actually sitting down and breathing less air. So part of it was to breathe less air. Still is. I had one hand on my chest, one hand on my tummy, and I was just gently slowing down my breathing to the point that I was taking about 30% less air into the body. And the temperature in my hands started to warm up. I always had cold hands and cold feet. During high school, not high school, but university, if I was lucky enough to get a woman into the bed, she was probably gone by morning. Number one, because I was snoring my head off or stopping breathing. And number two was because I was like an iceberg. So these things, you always kind of resonate, and like a roll on now, it's 20 plus years. So it's different now, but being able to decongest my nose by holding my breath, being able to have much better sleep, waking up feeling alert in the morning, that was a game changer. My wheezing reduced quite significantly, even in that short space, the first few weeks. And breathing light, because there's so many ideas out there about breathing, breathing is bandied about, but ultimately it comes down to, we have to understand, if you do a breathing technique, what is it doing for you?
Yeah, agreed 100%. I think with me, I didn't have it as extreme with you. I had asthma as a kid, let's say cleared up without any intervention on me. That was when I was a baby. But growing up, I always felt the same, always super tired. And so even looking at this and getting that better night's sleep, like I look at my sleep, I have the Aura ring. I look at it and sometimes I'm like, wow, I got some really good sleep. And I do attribute it, a lot of it to the breathing. But before we get to nose unblocking and nose clog, because I know that's a barrier. When I first was reading or listening to your book, I remember walking on the street and it was outside. It was the winter and it was cold. So there was a little more congestion. And I was having a hard time with it until like kind of the nose unblocking would, kind of alleviate it. But let's talk about the advantages or why we should be nasal breathing first. Let's start off
quite simply. Your mouth. What does your mouth do when it comes to breathing? Your mouth is a hole whereby air goes straight down your throat into your lungs. There is no part of the mouth that's devoted to the breath. So I know it's easier during physical exercise to breathe through the mouth because carbon dioxide can be removed from the blood easier. And carbon dioxide is what's driving that sensation of air hunger. But I would say it's really about breathing through the nose at all times, and also during rest, during sleep, and also during light to moderate exercise. Nose breathing increases the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood by nearly 10%. That's known since 1988. Nose breathing, you harness a gas called nitric oxide, which helps to open up the airways. It's antiviral, and it's a bronchodilator, and it redistributes the blood throughout the lungs. But by breathing through your nose, you've got a better recruitment of the diaphragm. And the diaphragm breathing muscle is playing a role not just in respiration, but it provides stabilization of the spine. So there's a relationship between functional breathing and functional movement. If you are breathing high, using the upper chest, it's a sign that breathing is under power. And that's going to impact movement. And with dysfunctional movement, you're at a greater risk of injury. Nose breathing is also connected to the brain via the olfactory nerve. So there's a lot of communication that when you're breathing through your nose, this communication is fed to the brain, whereas not through the mouth. So for example, visual spatial awareness. You can imagine you're out in a football field and your eye is on the ball, but not only is your eye on the ball, but you have to be scanning your environment around you. That's improved with nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. And the researchers think it's because part of our evolution. We were, say, for example, we were out in wide open spaces, and we may have been hunting or whatever we were doing, but we had our focus on something, but at the same time, we were scanning for danger around us. So that was discovered back in 2019. Memory and attention is improved with nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. When you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, although the air hunger is stronger initially, that's only initially, because your body adapts to that. And you've got an increased tolerance to carbon dioxide then. And with the increased tolerance to carbon dioxide, you've got a better oxygen transfer to the working muscles, so you're more likely to stay aerobically for longer. You also have better recovery post-physical exercise. Now, the other thing about the nose low and slow breathing is the impact it has on mental health, mental strength. Currently I'm working with a world-class boxer. He has a world title in about 4 days. We're not just training his physical performance by doing long breath holds, by putting him into anaerobic glycolysis. We're not just training his breathing muscles, but we want to train the brain. Because I want any individual, I want them to be able to go out there and not when they feel physical performance that their mind starts wandering, because once the mind wanders, it's game over. And we use the breath as a means of anchoring attention and being able to move your attention simultaneously with time. In other words, accessing flow state. So in order to access flow state, you need to have a balance of the autonomic nervous system. Now, there's plenty of youngsters go out into a competition and their nerves is too much, and that's going to sabotage their performance. So, coming back to nose breathing, it helps to prevent dehydration. It helps to protect the airways. 20 to 50% of people have exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. Nasal breathing will help to prevent that. So there's a lot going on with the nose, Now, I know some people are going to say, well, what happens when I'm running really fast? Yeah, there's a time that you can mouth breathe, but that's a short time. Think about the bigger picture here.
Yeah, I knew from my experience, I did a 2K race on the rower, right, in Boston. And what I tried to focus on was the first 500 meters, all nose breathing. And it worked. I set my PR doing that, by the way. And after that, look, I had to take, it was too much for me, right? After that first 500. But I felt like as well, the recovery piece for me, even after the race, when you want to just get down and you want somebody to come over and, you want the ambulance to come over and you're dying, I focused on kind of getting that nose breath back in as soon as I can. And I feel like I recovered. My heart rate recovers a lot quicker when I do that. Even the other night, I did 30 minutes, like kind of zone 2, watching the hockey game, all nose breathing, right? And for me, I feel like I'm getting better from the perspective of my heart rate was in the beginning when I first started doing that. It was a little harder. My heart rate would be kind of up. I'd have to use my mouth a little bit more, but now it's straight up and try to do it as much as I can when I'm outside, walking the dog or rucking, etc. So I think those are all things that I know personally that I'm agreeing with. And I think I'm glad the way you phrased all this was, this is the Strength Coach podcast. We're talking to trainers, we're talking to coaches who are working with athletes. All of that stuff is important for athletes too. So I think sometimes coaches think, that's for another day, not for when they're with me, but it's not true. But there's so many different protocols with breathing. I did something with Laird Hamilton's group on breathing. We went over like 20 different breathing protocols. James Nestor wrote the book Breath, which he referenced your book in as well. And he has a lot of protocols at the end. But sometimes I think that can get a little bit, this is why I like your stuff. It gets a little bit confusing. Like, what should I do? Even in Atomic Focus, you had the 8. Hey, this is for sleep. This is for concentration. This is for nose unblocking, right? So it was pretty easy to really understand. Did you go over this? And because I think some of it's counterintuitive. when you first hear it. The LSD, light, slow, and deep. Because I think you have a different definition. Really, when I first heard it, anyway, I was like, "Oh, okay, deep. Yeah, that's not the deep that we're all used to."
Mm-hmm.
And the light kind of is counterintuitive with, "Wait, I'm not supposed to be taking that much air in." So, can you go over LSD for us?
See, breathing is a number of different dimensions. And when people think about breathing, a lot of the time they think it's about the biomechanics. It's about recruitment of the diaphragm. But that's one dimension. Breathing, in essence, has three dimensions. The light breathing aspect is about the biochemical dimension of breathing. So light breathing is about improving your tolerance to carbon dioxide. So you can imagine an athlete who's out there, and the athlete is gassing out too soon, or the athlete has disproportionate breathlessness, and the coach is thinking, what's going on here? Because this guy is having the same training as everybody else, but why is this guy breathing harder and faster? Okay, he mightn't have asthma, but he could have dysfunctional breathing. And it's his tolerance to carbon dioxide, it's his oversensitivity to the accumulation of carbon dioxide that's causing them to breathe harder and faster, which is wasting energy, which is he's gassing out, and that sensation of breathlessness is going to hold him back. So to improve breathing from a biochemical dimension, it's about improving tolerance to CO2. So we use a number of different exercises, but one exercise was the one we described earlier on. You put one hand on your chest, one hand on your tummy. You exert gentle pressure with your hands against your chest and tummy. And the objective is to take a really soft breath in through your nose, almost as if you're hardly breathing at all. And then a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And the whole aim of this exercise is to simply soften your breathing. In other words, to breathe light to the point of air hunger. Don't worry if you're breathing upper chest or recruitment of the diaphragm. It doesn't matter at this point. It's about getting that sensation of air hunger. So by exposing your body to increased carbon dioxide, it helps to reduce your chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide or improve your CO2 tolerance. Now, another way you could do it is go for a walk with your mouth closed, go for a jog with your mouth closed. Because when you do your physical exercise with your mouth closed, especially during a warm-up, the coach might be listening saying, I can't bring breathing exercise. Why can't you bring breathing exercise? You should be bringing exercise. Do you know the potential of breathing exercise in sports? Now, the sports medicine scientists are starting to catch up here. If you go into Google and you put in breath tools running, a group of Austrian researchers in the last few months wrote quite a decent scientific article investigating it, and nose breathing being part of that. So there's different ways that you can include this seamlessly. So that's the biochemical dimension. So we should think about that as being reducing ventilation during physical exercise. In other words, training the body to do more with less. Now, from a biomechanical dimension, it's about good recruitment of the diaphragm. So as we take air into the lungs, it should be driven mainly by the diaphragm, that the diaphragm breathing muscle is moving downwards. The intercostal muscles are pulling out. The pressure inside the chest is reducing, and this is what causes air to come into the lungs. But it's the movement of the diaphragm back up to its resting position then, which influences the zone of apposition. And this is in turn influencing intra-abdominal pressure. It's really important that we have good breathing, not just from a biomechanical point of view, but also a biochemical point of view, but certainly in terms of strength and conditioning. There was one paper, and I think I sent it on to you earlier. It's probably going to be in the show notes. They did a study, and I can't remember exactly, but it's quite a large group of students and different athletes, and 90% of them were found to have dysfunctional breathing from a biomechanical point of view. In other words, they were breathing too high. Now, you think of the core. People talk about the core and strengthening the core. Well, they think the core is just the abs. That's not true. The core is not just the abs. The inner core consists of the diaphragm at the top, the pelvic floor to the bottom, the abs to the front, and the spinal muscles, the back muscles to the back. And when we take a breath in, the diaphragm is moving downwards. And when we exhale, the diaphragm is moving back up to its resting position. And that's what's providing stabilization and the generation of intra-abdominal pressure. And that's what's assisting in functional movement. Now, the third dimension of breathing is, what do we do in terms of changing states? So, for example, you spoke about bringing down your heart rate. Well, discovered back in 1905 by one researcher, it was Lowy, I think it could have been. It might be somebody else. But basically, he isolated the heart of a frog. And he found that by stimulating the vagus nerve, which secreted a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, it causes the heart rate to slow down. So how do we stimulate the vagus nerve in terms of breathing? Think about slowing down the exhalation. So, for example, taking a softer breath in through the nose and a really relaxed and slow, gentle breath out, it causes the heart rate to slow down. I'll give you a practical example of this. Some guy is taking a penalty shot. There's a lot of psychological pressure on him or her, and they start getting a little bit angst. Their breathing is speeding up. They're not going to do well because their body and mind has gone into a fight or flight response. It's the same. I've worked with special forces, teaching them how to breathe while pulling the trigger of a gun. So these would be snipers, elite regiment. And you can think that they're in a harsh environment. They're in a hot environment. They're under psychological pressure because their target could be 200 yards away. Their heart rate is up to 130 beats per minute. The whole objective is to pull the trigger in between heartbeats. So in order to get better accuracy, we need to bring down the heart rate. So we take a soft breath in through the nose and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out through the nose. Nobody even knows that you're doing it. And by doing this, we can bring down the heart rate fairly quickly. And we pull the trigger just towards the bottom of the heart rate. We pull the trigger just towards the bottom of the breath. And the objective is to pull the trigger between heartbeats. Now, you can imagine some girl or guy, they're going to take a free kick. And instead of hyperventilating in response to the psychological pressure to be able to regulate their states, they've got a few seconds just to compose themselves. Soft breath in through the nose and a relaxed, slow, gentle breath out. Now they're down regulating and they're getting balance in the autonomic nervous system. There's a time that we want to upregulate and there's a time that we want to downregulate. If we're too stressed, it's a mess. But if we're too relaxed, it's a mess. And this is the tools of breathing, So, you can break it down to that, like even recovery for fighters between rounds. You've got 1 minute. How do you change their breathing patterns to improve their recovery as quick as possible? And there's so many variables here. Like for me, recovery is about sleep. It's about improving heart rate variability. And to increase heart rate variability, it's an objective measurement of vagal tone, but it kind of gives us an idea, where are we in terms of body and mind? Are we too stressed? Are we too relaxed? Or is it optimal? Because for flow state, we need to have that balanced physiology. And, we tie in light breathing helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. Slow breathing helps to stimulate it. Low breathing helps to stimulate it. Nose breathing. So even on the aura ring, I don't think the metrics for HRV are perfectly accurate, but the feedback would have been that when somebody is breathing through their nose, their slow wave sleep is better. They've got deeper sleep, and it can help to increase their heart rate variability. But that's all about recovery. When we think about recovery, it's not just how do you breathe when you come off the training session. It's your 24-hour breathing. You can imagine someone, they're pushing themselves during training. Then they're going around with their mouth open, walking around. They're sighing, they're having irregular breathing, they have their mouth open during sleep. That's going to impact their performance. And it's also about the mind. Because for me, one of the biggest tools out of this is the ability to be able to hold attention on one thing. It's absolutely paramount. And if you think of it, Anthony, very few of us have been trained how to concentrate. We've spent 12 to 16 years, most of us, in formal education. And formal education mentions nothing about controlling the mind. Nothing. All it is filling the mind with information. And half of it is, you could argue, is useless. But it's really about having the capacity to be able to hold your attention. That if, for example, when things get really tough during a sporting event, is your mind going to be wandering, or are you able to keep your attention exactly where it should be? You don't practice that just on the day of the event, the day of competition. You practice that in the weeks coming up to it, But how many people are going around with their mobile phone stuck in their hand, glued to their mobile phone, which is a distraction device? So they're practicing distraction all day long, and yet they want to be focused when they're out in the field. It's not going to happen.
It's funny. I wrote this down today because I love this definition of this idea about success. And you brought up Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and when Bill Gates' mom asked everybody the question, and Gates and Buffett both said focus, but you really made a nice distinction. You said focus is being able to narrow your attention to one thing. Concentration is holding your attention on one thing, and attention span is how long you can concentrate for. And the focus times the concentration times the attention span, that's what's going to equal success. And like you said, that is not going to just happen just by trying to think about, oh, I need to focus on this right now. And it's funny because if you look at any meditation, if you look at what's the first thing they talk about is breath in meditation, right? It's one of the easiest ways to focus on, clearing your mind. I remember learning about somebody it was 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the breath out and the breath in, you think of the number 1 going out and then coming in. And then you think of the number 2, you visualize it, and that's what your focus is on. So it's teaching you to kind of focus on that. So I really like that this is kind of tying all together. And I love what you talked about with sleep, because it does start with there. And this is an easy way I think it's an easy way to get people to start to breathe through the nose. Because sometimes when in the beginning, it's hard because they might think, I'm at work, and they're not thinking about it, right? And then it's a conscious effort. But when you sleep and you tape that mouth, it's kind of a no-brainer when you're doing it. Is the sleep really the best way to start for somebody, or is it enough in the very beginning to make some real drastic changes?
I think it's a good place to start. I think it's a good place because you're going to see, it really depends on the person. You might have a person who's waking up with a moist mouth in the morning anyway, so they're breathing through their nose. But how about the individual who's waking up with a dry mouth in the morning? How about, and you can even see this with youngsters, like a 20-year-old. And I've worked with athletes, and two guys were 400-meter top-level sprinters, track and field. And they were getting up to go to the bathroom once and twice every night. And I said, we shouldn't have to get up to go to the bathroom, because already your sleep has been disrupted there. The fact that you've had to get up and go to the bathroom and then come back, and you're going back, and that's going to affect your focus then out in the field. So getting the mouth closed, I think, is really important for that group. If anybody wakes up with a dry mouth, the other thing is men should wake up with an erection in the morning. I know it's kind of, I don't know who your audience is, but it's very normal. But if a man has poor sleep, it doesn't happen. So always it can be a sign. Say, for example, if I work a lot with people with obstructive sleep apnea, which is more common with the stronger guys, the weightlifters, the American footballers, rugby players, for example. And if you have obstructive sleep apnea, your sleep is disrupted and you're being taken out of that slow wave sleep. You have sleep fragmentation, puts a lot of pressure and stress on the heart. When you hear of a guy and he's dying at 40 years of age because of a heart issue, you have to suspect, could he have undiagnosed sleep apnea? But erectile dysfunction is also common with sleep disorder breathing. So I suppose, Anthony, it really depends on the person. But I think you're right. For me, it was getting the mouth closed and waking up feeling more refreshed in the morning. It was just a simple thing to do that I didn't have to think about. And the fact that you have your mouth closed then for 6 or 8 hours, you're already starting the process.
Yeah, for me, that was where it really, and I'm a big walker. So that was another thing that kind of, I like to listen to books while I go for a walk. I have a dog that also, so I was able to really focus on, okay, keep the mouth shut. It's only, me and Emma going out there. So that was always relatively easy. So I felt like I can get a lot in. It's, it's still a struggle once in a while. For example, maybe because I'm just talking to you, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut and go from there. Sometimes when you're on a podcast, though, you're talking too much, so it can be a problem.
But don't worry about because I'm the same. Like people, you'll see it up on YouTube, and he's saying, "Oh, here's the nose breathing guy, and he's taking a breath through the mouth." What we're doing is we're looking at the big picture here.
Yeah,
it's the overall, as opposed to becoming so kind of. There's some people who have such perfectionist tendencies that they absolutely need to get 100%. No, nothing is like that. And with the breath, we never strive for perfection, but we're looking for the overall picture. And I think coming back to your question earlier on, how would you embrace? I think doing what you're doing, walking, going out for a light jog with your mouth closed is huge. And do you know what the other thing is? Doing a few breath holds. Now, breath holds are brilliant. If you're not pregnant, if you don't have anxiety or panic disorder or any serious medical conditions, I'll give you this example. Athletes often train doing shuttle training or doing sprints, high intensity training to stimulate anaerobic glycolysis. And during that, their blood oxygen saturation will drop down to maybe about 94% maybe 96% with their mouth open, 94%, 93% with their mouth closed. Now, you could simply do this practice. You're at home, you've got 10 minutes to spare. Take a normal breath in and out through your nose, hold your nose, start jogging and holding your breath. And you're jogging your breath, you're jogging and you're holding your breath until you feel a moderate to strong air hunger, and then let go, breathe in through your nose. What that's done is, that has stimulated anaerobic glycolysis much stronger than what you would achieve during a sprint. Your blood oxygen saturation, if you were to monitor it, because normally we have pulse oximeters. I don't have one to hand, but simple devices. You pick them up for about $30. Your objective is to drop your blood oxygen saturation down to about 85%, maybe down to the low 80s. And by doing that, it causes the body to make adaptations, which include improve the buffering capacity. And it's thought that it's happening inside in the muscle compartment. So with an increased buffering capacity inside the muscle compartment, it delays hydrogen ion coming into the blood, and as a result, it can delay lactic acid and fatigue. Now, you can think of the other way. Athletes who are sprinting to stimulate anaerobic glycolysis to improve buffering capacity, but that's traumatic, and it can cause a risk of injury, especially if it's coming close to competition. So you could start dialing down on the sprinting, but start dialing up on breath hold jogging. And you could sometimes we do breath hold sprinting. We do different techniques, but that's just to give you an example, like you could be at home in your sitting room and you could do this, and you don't need equipment. All you need is yourself, the breath. That's it.
Yeah. And actually, can you just go over two things? I want you to go over is I want you just to talk about Bolt, because we as coaches, we're always looking for assessments or seeing where people are. So let's go over Bolt, and then let's go over the walking. No, it's number 2, right? Yeah. Not clear your head. It was, just the walking, when you were talking about walking and breathing like 10 to 15 paces. Because to me, that's something they can do in a warm-up even.
Yes.
It's pretty easy. We're not even asking them to jog. So when we get the questions, I don't want people running and this is walking 15 paces. So go over Bolt and go over that.
Yeah. Bolt score is you have to be sitting down for about 5 minutes with normal breathing. And you simply take a normal breath in and out through your nose. You pinch your nose and you hold your breath, and you time it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, or the first involuntary movement of your breathing muscles. Then you let go, and your breathing should be fairly normal. So we've been using the Bolt score for about 20 years. And recently, a professor of physical therapy, Kyle Kiesel, I'm not sure when he did the test, I think it was back in 2018. He looked at 51 individuals with an average age of about 27 years of age, and he looked at their breathing from the 3 different dimensions, and he concluded that a very easy way to assess for breathing pattern disorders is comfortable breath hold time, which is exactly the same as the Bolt score or the control pause from Buteyko. So his conclusion was, if your Bolt score is above 25 seconds, there's an 89% chance that your breathing is functional. So with athletes, we would always be striving to increase their breath hold time to above 25 seconds. Now, some athletes, you could see really top class athletes, and yet they can have a low Boyle score. But for them to achieve what they're achieving is taking a lot more effort. So if you can improve the Boyle score, you can improve your efficiency, and it'll take less out of the individual as well. So it's worth doing. And then you might ask, well, how come they're so fit, but they've a low Boyle score? Physical training doesn't change your breathing patterns unless you swim or do some of your physical training with the mouth closed. So if you were to do some of your physical training with the mouth closed, it adds an extra load onto your breathing muscles. So, people talk about you go to the gym, you add an extra load onto your muscles, you want to strengthen and train them. But who trains and strengthens the diaphragm? We should be thinking that the diaphragm is as important, if not more important, than your arms and legs. Because ultimately, if the diaphragm gives up, blood is stolen from the legs to feed the diaphragm. So you could have an athlete going down the track, and the next thing is their legs are going from under them. Why is their legs going from under them? Is it due to a buildup of hydrogen ion, which could be delayed if they had increased buffering capacity and increased oxygen delivery to the working muscles? Or could it be due to diaphragm fatigue, which has caused blood stealing? And as a result, then their legs went from under them. So that's trainable by changing breathing. So the Boyle score, it's not perfect. And I would say to people, don't worry about having to get it perfect. It just gives you an indication. And really the thing is, bring breathing into your way of life. Just see small improvements in your Boyle score over a period of time. It's the individuals who have maybe some trauma, perfectionist tendencies, they put high pressures on themselves, psychological stress, individuals prone to exercise-induced asthma. So it just can be a number. Females, hormonal changes as well. So because during the monthly cycle, post-ovulation, mid-luteal phase, there's an increase in progesterone, which is a respiratory stimulant. So there's a number of different things that can influence Boyle, but the Boyle score is trainable. Now, what does the Boyle score provide you feedback of? Well, it provides you feedback of your functional breathing, but more directly, your chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. If you've got a higher Boyle score, you've got a good tolerance to carbon dioxide. And remember, carbon dioxide is the driver to breathe during physical exercise. You want to have good tolerance of the gas carbon dioxide because then you have less breathlessness during exercise. So that's the Boyle score. The second one then you were talking about is the exercise, doing breath holding. So you could be out walking your dog. You're walking at a steady pace. You're breathing in and out through your nose. You can breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose. You could hold your nose, or you could just simply stop breathing. And stop breathing for maybe 10 to 15 paces. And then you go back to normal breathing for about a half a minute to a minute. And then after about a minute of normal breathing as you're walking, breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose, pinch your nose and hold, and stop breathing for about 10 to 15 paces. Do a few easy ones first, but then do a few strong ones. So as you continue walking, you're walking the dog, breathe in and out through the nose, hold your breath, and now continue walking while you hold your breath until you feel a moderate to strong air hunger. You will feel the involuntary contractions of the diaphragm. Your brain is telling the diaphragm to breathe, and that's why you're feeling the involuntary contractions there. Relax into it and push it a little bit, but don't overdo it. There should be nothing extreme about breathing. I'm not into the extremes at all. I think it's really important to gently challenge our body over time because we can still get to the same place, but it's safer. So do it, this is going to vary from person to person, but what I would say is do a few easy ones first. So you're out doing the walk, hold your breath, breathe in, breathe out, hold your nose. Always exhale first and then hold your breath. 10 to 15 paces, continue walking with normal breathing for a minute. 10 to 15 paces, continue walking with normal breathing for about a minute. Now increase it to about 20 to 30 paces. See how it goes for you. Then walk, resume breathing with normal breathing for about a minute, continue walking. And then after about a minute or two, hold it to 40 or 50 paces. Push it. And this time then you're challenging the body and your body will be making those adaptations. But it will increase blood flow to the brain. It opens up your nose. It's tremendous for your lungs because it helps to open up your lungs. It also causes your spleen to contract. when you drop your blood oxygen saturation down to about 85%, so your spleen, for example, is a blood bank. It contains about 8% of your red blood cells. So by doing breath holds, you can cause your spleen to contract to release red blood cells into circulation to increase oxygen carrying capacity.
So interesting. This might be a dumb question, but why can't I just hold my breath? Why do I have to pinch my nose?
It's just a little bit easier. I think the thing is, it can be you're holding your breath and you're feeling a strong air hunger. It'll be a little bit of a struggle. Whereas if you just simply pinch your nose, or even just block the inside of the nostrils, you can kind of just relax into it easier. So I think it's just a psychological thing.
Okay, great. Now, I was talking to Coach Boyle about this probably 2 weeks ago, or maybe even last week, last episode. He was talking about using breathing for the core. In his core training, that's the only time he's really talking to his people. And I was asking him, why not during strength training? Because one of the things that I learned through Strong First was using the breath, this inhale through the nose and to kind of activate the core, and some breath holds as well, while you're doing some, a piece of it. And then this very, kind of tight breath out. It can help you not just become stronger, but you seem to have more strength. And I've noticed that I've lifted more, and more of the skill as a strength component, or the strength as a skill, that piece of it. So learning some techniques in that movement to be stronger. Can you just talk about not only the what we just talked about, going over what we might do in a warm-up, what we might do with some sprinting, but what about with lifting weights? Is there anything that you've looked at, or any research that you've looked at with breathing and actually picking up weight?
Yeah, lifting weights can be a little bit different, because we don't want to be doing long breath holds during the process of weightlifting, because it can drive up blood pressure. And we've monitored this a little bit, and we've seen blood pressure increasing, the systolic increasing to over 200, the diastolic actually dropping down to 70. So we kind of steer away from the whole breath holding during the weightlifting. The objective during weightlifting would be that the individual has a decent Bolt score. And we also want people who are during sports, a good gauge of the generation of intra-abdominal pressures. You put your hands either side of your lower ribs, and as you breathe in, are you able to push the side ribs outwards? Because it takes IAP to push the ribs outwards. So it's a gauge of the generation of intra-abdominal pressure. And we're thinking about that in terms of stabilization for the spine. Now, it's very normal. When you go to lift a weight, you will typically breathe in and hold your breath for a brief period of time. That's because as you breathe in and you hold your breath, your diaphragm is moving downwards. So now your abdomen is like a pneumatic balloon to provide stabilization for the spine. But it's only for a brief period of time, and then it's reversing back to normal breathing. So I think weightlifting can be a little bit of the exception, but I would go back to it regardless of any activity that you're doing. You could be doing squats, you could be press-ups, any sort of activities. You can always maintain nose breathing, and you could be doing inhale down, exhale gently up, breathing in and out through the nose. You could be doing your squats with some breath holds. You can be creative with the breath by just paying attention to it and changing it.
Yeah, I remember after speaking, I can't believe I forget Brian McKenzie's partner, who's really the breath expert in his company. And I had him on the show, and he was just kind of recommending some of these movements in breathing out, to really be able to focus on concentrating when you should be breathing or breathing out. And it really brought the focus back to the breath. So I thought it was a really interesting piece. And I think it brings another level to when you're doing some of these exercises from the perspective of focus. Can you talk about, this is one problem that I had originally, I told you earlier, was the nose clogging. And can you talk about that exercise that you use to help people get their nose unclogged?
Well, the exercise that we talked about while you're out walking your dog, That will also decongest the nose. Anytime you hold your breath for a period of time, your nose opens up. So if anybody wants to try it there, you could take a normal breath in and out through your nose. You pinch your nose, you hold your nose, and you could just simply nod your head up and down holding your breath. And just keep on nodding your head up and down as you hold your breath. And then you let go, but you breathe in through your nose. Now, you have to hold your breath until you feel a moderate to strong air hunger. But you could do it anyway. You could do it this way. Take a normal breath in through your nose, out through your nose, pinch your nose, hold, and just jog, holding your breath. Jog in the spot. Jog in the spot, holding the breath. Then let go and breathe in through your nose. Now, it's not just your nose that opens up, it's also your lower airways. So for people with exercise-induced bronchial constriction, I always want them to warm up their lungs. So, when people talk about a warm-up for the muscles, what about a warm-up for the lungs, especially those individuals who are prone to it? And the warm-up also should be training for the brain. So warm-up should be about bringing techniques in to be able to regulate states. And I think it's in Atomic Focus. There's a warm-up in there that you start off with nose, light, slow breathing. Nose breathing, light breathing, slow breathing, low breathing. It helps to down-regulate the autonomic nervous system. Like, there's plenty of athletes before a major event, they're inside in the bathroom, they're puking up, their nerves is totally taking control over them. And I remember talking to one athlete and he was saying he was so anxious before a game. And he explained to the psychologist who was on their team that he was really anxious. And the psychologist said to him to embrace his nerves. And I was just thinking, listen, here's an athlete who's very nervous. Why not use breathing techniques to show this athlete how to down-regulate? Because when we're nervous, our breathing gets faster, harder, irregular, upper chest. And all that's going to do is feed into a fight or flight response. So sit the guy down, or at least bring it into his warm-up. Bring a routine into his warm-up to regulate states, to get him out of his head, get him into the body. Down-regulate him first, but then up-regulate him, because you don't want him going to get too relaxed either. Like the Navy SEALs do it with box breathing. They breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That's about regulating states. They don't want to go into an operation, and if they're too relaxed, they're going to miss cues, which is life-threatening for them or their colleagues. If they're too stressed, there's an increased risk of lethal force. And also in the police as well. And they've looked at studies, in terms of police officers going into frontline situations. Where should they be with regards to the autonomic nervous system? Not too stressed, not too relaxed. Athletes should be the same. We weave this into the warm-up. You down-regulate the individual first, and you up-regulate them, but you do it as part of just a normal sequence.
The box breathing, that was what is down is because if people don't know, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, you hold for 4, and you keep that going.
Yes.
What is the holds doing there to down-regulate? Why? Because how is that different from any other, or me just saying I'm going to breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 8 seconds, for example? What are the holds doing?
Well, you breathe in. Say, for example, you're breathing in for 4 seconds, and then you're holding for 4. During this breath hold, oxygen transfer is going from the lungs into the blood. There's sufficient time for oxygen transfer to take place. You're also taking quite a full breath. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call this a down-regulation part of the breath, because down-regulation is normally the exhalation and the hold after the exhalation. So you consider box breathing is more about bringing balance to the autonomic nervous system. Remember, the Navy SEAL doesn't want to be too stressed, but doesn't want to be too relaxed either. So they do box breathing to bring balance. I think, though, this can affect people a little bit differently. There was a rugby international I was talking with. He practiced this for 20 minutes. And then he went out and he said it took him the entire first half. He still didn't get to the state he wants to be. He was too down-regulated. So what I would say to anybody, whenever you're bringing in a breathing technique, use it plenty during your training first to know exactly the impact it has on your physiology. And then when you're comfortable with that this has the effect for you, then you can bring it into your competition. So say, for example, then you're breathing out for 4 seconds, but that's a slow, prolonged exhalation, which is a down regulator. But then you're holding your breath for 4 seconds, which is a further down regulator. Nitric oxide is pooling inside the nose. Then you let go, you're breathing in. You're carrying that nitric oxide into your lungs. It's a vasodilator in the lungs. It's a bronchodilator, opens up the airways. So yeah, there's different things happening with it. Now, the other thing, Anthony, is how much air is the person breathing in for 4 seconds? You could have somebody breathing in very subtly for 4, or you get somebody taking full big breath in for 4. It's a different breath.
Yeah, so ideally,
Shouldn't hear it.
we would want to be really like light and slow, though, right? I mean,
yeah, I would say breathe in and out through the nose, but don't hear it.
Don't hear it.
Yeah. If you don't hear it, there's a good chance that you're not going to be hyperventilating.
Yeah.
Now, the very fact, sorry to be cutting across you there, I don't know if there's a delay, but the very fact anyway, you're holding your breath and then you're breathing out and holding your breath, you're probably not going to hyperventilate anyway. So it's a pretty good exercise in fairness.
Yeah, I've actually used that as well. Once I kind of heard about that, just to try to, I had my wife doing it for sleep at one time, just to kind of get into, and also just, there is something about doing some of these exercises that will calm you down just from the focus. Just, it does clear your brain a little bit, almost no matter what you're doing, which protocol you're doing, right? It's just, there's something that you're focusing on it. And now you're taking away those external, the forces that they're trying to infiltrate work from the day and stress and family stuff. And when you're just thinking about that, it's not that you could do anything, but when you're focused on some kind of breathing protocol, you're really going to clear your mind, in my opinion, my experience, I should say. So I just want to go back really quick with the swimmers. And then I have one more question about protocols with cardio. Is swimming, they're really mouth breathing in swimming. So I was thinking, swimming would be a great, because you're doing some breath holds, but at the same time, they're mouth breathing. So how are swimmers generally, in your experience, how are they from like maybe a Bolt score or their breathing? How is that?
I would expect swimmers to have a fairly decent Bolt score.
Okay.
And the reason being is because very often they train hypercapnia. James Councilman was a very famous swimming coach in the United States, and he was introducing breath hold during swimming. What he wanted to do is he wanted the swimmer to be able to go across the length of a pool with fewer breaths. Because every time that the swimmer turns to take a breath, they lose propulsion in the water. So 50-meter sprinters, for example, they will do it with one breath. They will do the entire length of the pool just in one breath. If they turn their head to take a breath, they've lost time. So with swimming, of course, yes, the breath is in through the mouth, but breathing volume is still a lot less during swimming than it is during other sports. So, for example, you might have a swimmer that's taking a breath every 3 strokes, but then they may train to take one breath every 5 strokes, or one breath every 7 strokes, or then they're doing extended laps. Now, the only thing, as I would say, is never do hyperventilation before going into the pool. And the reason being is because it can cause underwater blackout and drowning. So you never do hyperventilation. But it's all about normal breathing, and it's about breathing through the mouth. So say, for example, you take a breath in through your mouth, and then you're slowly releasing the air, but you're having such conservation of the breath that instead of releasing the air over 2 or 3 strokes, you might increase it to 4 or 5 strokes. So that's how you train your body that way. Now, but it comes around full circle. It's not just how you breathe in the pool. Now, there's a couple of things happening though when you're in the pool. Remember we said to put your hand on your chest and tummy and to exert gentle pressure. When you're swimming, the water is doing that. So you're exerting pressure, so it's building up your breathing from a biomechanical point of view. You're also improving your breathing from a biochemical point of view. And then if you do happen to stay underwater for longer, you're going down, you're coming back up, that's also going to add another stressor in terms of hypoxic. Well, it probably wouldn't be hypoxic, but it would be a hypercapnic, higher CO2. But then how does the swimmer breathe when they get out of the pool? How do they breathe when they go to sleep? How do they breathe if they get into a stressful situation? In other words, is their breathing outside of the pool going to hold them back in terms of the breathing in the pool? The breathing in the pool can be great, but we also need to consider breathing outside the pool.
Excellent. Love that. The last question I have for you today is, I know a lot of people, the pendulum has swung pretty far on some of these protocols. And we talked about it earlier with some of the stuff I was doing, saying, okay, the first 500 meters were going to be nose only, but then I needed more. I needed a little bit more. There's no way I'm going to be able to do it personally. What's the recommendation with some of this higher intensity training and nose breathing, and where do we draw the line? Where do we need to, is there some kind of recommendations that you have for when people are doing some of the more higher intensity cardio and using nose breathing?
You should always be having good control of your breathing when you're breathing in through the nose. Like, it doesn't make any sense to be breathing so forcefully in and out through your nose that you're going to cause damage to the inside of your nose. So a person's ability to do physical exercise with their mouth closed is influenced by a number of things. One is the size of their nasal airway. So, for example, if they have a wide nasal airway, they can breathe more air in because there's less resistance to their breathing, so they have an advantage. People of African origin have an advantage because they have a wider nasal airway. And I've seen some African Americans, and they can do 400-meter sprints with their mouth closed. Sonia Ross Richards. Imagine doing a 400-meter sprint with your mouth closed. And I can send you on a photograph. She's in full flight and her mouth is closed. The second thing is boat score. If you've got a higher boat score, it implies that you've got better breathing efficiency. So your ventilation will be reduced. And because your ventilation is reduced, you won't need so much air for a given intensity of exercise. So I suppose, Anthony, it depends on a couple of factors, I have a really compromised nasal airway, I have a deviated septum. So I use nasal dilators when I do my physical exercise. So we have our own little nasal dilators, put them in, they open up my nose, do physical exercise. So therefore I can maintain a higher intensity of physical exercise while maintaining nasal breathing. So especially with people with trauma to their nose. But I would say it's not about excruciating or uncomfortable breathing in through your nose during physical exercise. No, it's about maintaining control. You should be able to control your breathing during physical exercise, breathing in and out through your nose.
Awesome. Patrick, I've taken enough of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for doing this. Love your books. I will have all links for everybody on strengthcoachpodcast.com. So thanks so much for doing this.
You're very welcome. Pleasure. Thanks very much, Anthony.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 349 of the Strength Coach Podcast. You can try strengthcoach.com out 7 days for free. Totally new format, user-friendly, but the same great forum as always. Go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your free trial. Special thanks to Chris Parrier and the folks over at Perform Better. Holiday sale, 40% off. So many things. Racks, benches, bands, sandbags, you name it. Also, guys, the one-day seminars starting again in January in New Jersey. They're also going to be in Austin, LA, Chicago, and Boston in the coming months. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Patrick McKeown for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength, conditioning, and performance and breathing. Check out the anniversary interview I did with Coach Boyle, 40 Mistakes, 40 Years. There is a link to access that at strengthcoachpodcast.com. Thanks to Namli helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to namli.com, use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Thanks to Vince Gabriele and KISS Marketing. If you need some help with your marketing, head over to kissmarketing.net. Book a free coaching call. Will Matheson, he will take a look at your current marketing plan and give you some real-time profit-boosting advice. Kissmarketing.net to book a free coaching call. Thanks to Nico Willett and Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. Head over to perch.fit/strengthcoach to find out more about it. They have some great videos showing the cameras and how to use it. Thanks to Athletic Greens. Visit athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach and get your free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs today. My name's Anthony Rana. Check out the show notes at continuefit.com. Thanks for listening, and I will speak to you next time.